Picture this. A woman in a designer coat walks up to the front desk of the most exclusive private club in the city. She slides her golden membership card across the counter with a smirk, expecting the usual bow and smile. But this time, the woman behind the desk doesn't smile back. She looks down at the card, then looks up and says 4 words that stop the room cold. "This card is canceled." The woman in the coat blinks. She laughs, thinking it's a joke. "Do you know who I am? My husband owns half this city." The woman behind the desk closes the folder in front of her, folds her hands, and says calmly, "I know exactly who you are. And I'm the new owner of this club." Silence falls over the lobby. Members turn their heads. Somewhere, a coffee cup stops halfway to someone's lips. Because 5 years ago, that same woman standing behind the desk was the one who used to fetch coffee for the woman in the coat. She was the one who got humiliated, blamed, and thrown out of a job she loved. And now, she was standing on the other side of the counter, holding the one thing that mattered most to a woman who thought she was untouchable, her membership. This is not just a story about a club, or a card, or a title. This is a story about how far people can fall when they think power will protect them forever, and how far someone can rise when they refuse to be crushed by humiliation. My name is Mia, and before I tell you how I ended up owning the very club that once fired me, I need to take you back to where it all started, to the front desk, to the coffee, and to the woman who thought she could destroy me without consequences. Stay with me, because what happened next will remind you that some debts, no matter how long they take, always get paid. 3 years before that moment, I was 26 years old, working the front desk at the Aurelia Club, the kind of place where a single lunch cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I wasn't born into money. My mother raised me alone after my father left when I was 9. She worked double shifts at a laundry service, and I grew up understanding one thing early. Nothing in this world is given to you. You have to fight for every inch of it. So when I got the job at Aurelia, I treated it like a gift. I showed up early. I stayed late. I memorized the names of every member, their favorite drinks, their birthdays, even their children's names. I wasn't just doing a job. I was building a future, one polite smile at a time. I told myself, one day, I'll have something of my own. Not just a badge that says staff. Something real. I remember my very first week at Aurelia, standing behind the polished front desk in a uniform that still smelled new, terrified of making a mistake in front of people who could buy the building I stood in without blinking. My supervisor at the time, an older woman named Ruth, told me something simple that I held on to for years. Do your job well, treat everyone with grace, and let your work speak louder than your background ever could. I took that advice like scripture. Within 6 months, members started requesting me by name for reservations and event coordination. I felt, for the first time in my adult life, like I was building something that mattered. I wasn't just serving people. I was earning a reputation, one small act of reliability at a time. The club was owned by a group of investors, but the man everyone respected and feared was Richard Whitmore. He was the CEO of a massive holding company, and Aurelia was practically his second home. Members would stand a little straighter when he walked in. Waiters would double-check every dish before it reached his table. And then there was his wife, Vanessa Whitmore. Vanessa wasn't like the other members. Most of them treated staff with basic respect. Vanessa treated us like furniture. She would snap her fingers instead of speaking. She would send back a drink 3 times, not because it was wrong, but because she enjoyed watching someone apologize to her. The first time she spoke to me directly, she looked me up and down and said, "Sweetheart, remember your place. People like you don't get to make mistakes here. People like me get to make yours disappear." I laughed it off at the time. I thought she was just having a bad day. I had no idea that sentence would come back to haunt me, and that one day, I would be the one deciding whether people like her got to stay in a place like this at all. Over the following months, Vanessa's behavior became a pattern, not an exception. She would arrive for lunch and demand the best table, even if it was already reserved. If we explained politely that another member was expected, she would raise her voice loud enough for the whole lobby to hear. "Do you know how much money my husband puts into this place? Give me the table." We always gave her the table. One afternoon, she asked me to hold her purse while she went to the restroom. When she came back, she claimed a bracelet was missing from inside it. She said it loud enough for the manager to hear, loud enough for other members to turn and stare at me. I stood there, my heart pounding, insisting I hadn't touched anything. The manager searched the lost and found. Nothing was found, because nothing was missing. 10 minutes later, Vanessa found the bracelet on her own wrist, laughing lightly and saying, "Oh, silly me. I guess I was wearing it the whole time." She never apologized. She simply walked away, leaving me standing there, shaking, humiliated in front of people who had, until that moment, respected me. That night, I went home and cried in front of my mother. She held my hands and said something I never forgot. "Mia, some people only feel powerful when they make others feel small. Don't let her make you believe you are small. One day, the world will show her exactly who you are." I wanted to believe her. But at the time, I was just a front desk employee with no power, no protection, and no idea that things were about to get much worse before they got better. A few weeks after the bracelet incident, there was another moment I still remember clearly. A young waiter named Daniel, new to the job, accidentally spilled a small amount of water near Vanessa's table while refilling glasses. It wasn't even on her, just on the tablecloth near her side. Vanessa stood up dramatically, as if she had been drenched, and demanded that Daniel be removed from the floor immediately. The manager, eager to keep her calm, pulled Daniel from his shift without pay for the rest of the day. I watched Daniel walk to the staff room afterward, quiet and embarrassed, holding back tears in front of the other employees. I brought him a cup of tea and told him it wasn't his fault. He looked at me and said something that stuck with me for a long time. "How do people like her get to decide who gets punished and who doesn't?" I didn't have an answer for him then. I only had a feeling, deep in my chest, that this pattern of behavior was not going to stop on its own. Someone, someday, was going to have to stand up to it. I just never imagined that someone would eventually be me, standing on the other side of an ownership contract instead of a front desk counter. Because Vanessa wasn't just cruel for entertainment. She was about to make a decision that would cost me everything: my job, my reputation, and almost my will to keep going. It happened on a Friday evening, during the club's biggest annual gala. Every important member was there, including several business partners of Richard Whitmore. The pressure on the staff that night was enormous. One mistake, and it wouldn't just embarrass a guest, it could cost the club a major deal. Vanessa arrived wearing a necklace worth more than I would earn in 10 years. She made sure everyone noticed it. Halfway through the event, she approached me and asked me to store her clutch bag behind the desk while she mingled. I agreed, like always. An hour later, she returned, opened the bag in front of a group of Richard's business partners, and gasped, "My necklace is gone." The room went silent immediately. All eyes turned to me. I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't touched the bag. I hadn't even opened it. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Vanessa was already crying, dramatically clutching her chest, saying the necklace was a gift from her husband on their 10th anniversary. Security was called. My bag was searched. My locker was searched. Nothing was found, because there was nothing to find. Guests watched from a distance, whispering behind their glasses of champagne, and I could feel every pair of eyes in that ballroom weighing whether I was guilty before a single fact had been checked. But by the next morning, I was called into the manager's office. Richard Whitmore himself was there, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Vanessa stood beside him, wiping fake tears with a tissue. "We can't prove anything," the manager said quietly, avoiding my eyes. "But given the seriousness of the accusation and our members' comfort, we have to let you go." I looked at Richard, hoping, praying, that he would say something, that he knew his wife well enough to question her story. Instead, he simply looked away and said, "I'm sorry, Mia, but my wife's word matters more here." That single sentence broke something in me, not just because I lost my job, but because I realized, in that room, that truth means nothing when you don't have power. Only power decides who gets believed. I walked out of Aurelia Club that day with an empty box of my belongings and a promise to myself that I whispered under my breath. One day, I will walk back into this place. And when I do, it will be on my own terms. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But that promise became the only thing keeping me standing. Losing that job broke more than my pride. It broke my finances. I had bills to pay, a mother who depended on me, and now, a damaged reputation because word travels fast in small elite circles. No other high-end club would hire someone accused, even falsely, of theft. For months, I took whatever work I could find. I cleaned offices at night. I delivered food during the day. I remember standing outside restaurants I once served drinks in, now dropping off delivery bags at their back doors, hoping no one recognized me. I applied to over 30 different clubs and hospitality venues during that time. Most never called back. A few called only to say, politely but firmly, that they had concerns about my previous employment history. I understood exactly what that meant, even if they never said Vanessa's name out loud. A single whispered accusation, even without proof, was enough to close doors that had once felt so open to me. I remember one particular rejection that hurt more than the others. A smaller boutique hotel had called me in for what I thought was a promising interview. Halfway through, the hiring manager paused, looked at her notes, and asked carefully, "Is it true you were let go over a missing item at your last job?" I explained everything, calmly, honestly. She nodded politely, thanked me for coming in, and I never heard from them again. There were nights I sat on the floor of my small apartment, exhausted, wondering if Vanessa was right. Maybe people like me really didn't get second chances. My mother would sit beside me on those nights, not saying much, just staying close, reminding me through her presence that I wasn't alone in this, even when it felt that way. But then, something shifted. While working a night cleaning shift at a small business center, I met a woman named Grace, an older entrepreneur who ran a boutique consulting firm from one of the offices. She noticed I was always early, always thorough, always polite despite my exhaustion. One night, she asked me to stay a few extra minutes and asked about my life. I told her everything. The club, the accusation, the humiliation, losing my job over a lie I never told. Instead of pity, she gave me something more valuable. She gave me an opportunity. "I need someone sharp for client relations," she said. "Someone who understands how to read people, how to stay calm under pressure. You've clearly survived worse than office politics." I took the job with everything I had left in me. I studied business at night. I learned negotiation, finance, and management from every book and course I could find. I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life, not out of ambition alone, but out of a burning need to prove that I was not what Vanessa said I was. Slowly, painfully, piece by piece, I started to rebuild myself. Not just my career, my identity. 3 years passed. I moved from client relations to managing entire accounts. Grace trusted me with bigger responsibilities, and I never let her down. Eventually, with her mentorship and a small group of investors who believed in my ideas, I started something of my own, a boutique hospitality consulting company that helped struggling private clubs and luxury venues fix their operations, staff training, and member retention. It sounds simple when I say it like that, but it wasn't. There were nights I didn't sleep. There were deals that fell apart. There were moments I wanted to quit and go back to something safe and small. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered the way Vanessa looked at me when she said, "People like you don't get to make mistakes here." And I remembered the promise I made walking out of that lobby with a cardboard box in my hands. My company grew faster than anyone expected. We turned around 3 failing venues in 2 years, each success bringing more attention, more investors, and more opportunities. Business magazines started writing about the quiet turnaround expert who could fix broken hospitality businesses without breaking the people inside them. One article, written after our second successful turnaround, quoted me saying something I truly believed. A business doesn't fail because of bad luck. It fails because somewhere along the way, people stopped being treated like people. That single line got shared widely within hospitality circles, and slowly, my name started to mean something again. Not as the girl who was accused of theft, but as the woman who understood how to rebuild broken places from the inside out. Grace, my mentor, would often remind me during our late-night strategy calls that success built on integrity always lasts longer than success built on fear. She had seen dozens of businesses rise and fall over her long career, and she recognized early on that my drive wasn't about proving people wrong. It was about proving to myself that I still had something valuable to offer the world, no matter what one bitter accusation had tried to take from me. By the 3rd year of running my own company, we had a small but dedicated team of 15 employees, most of whom had also faced setbacks in their own careers before finding a place with us. I made it a point to build a culture completely opposite to the one that had once hurt me, one where mistakes were corrected with conversation, not humiliation, and where no accusation was accepted without proper investigation. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was a call from an investment group looking for a partner to help evaluate a struggling private club that had lost members, revenue, and reputation over the past 2 years due to mismanagement. The club's name was Aurelia. I sat in silence for a long moment after hearing that name. Life has a strange way of circling back to unfinished chapters. I didn't say yes immediately. I asked for time. Because this wasn't just a business decision anymore. This was personal. And I needed to make sure that whatever I did next, I did it not out of anger, but out of purpose. I spent weeks studying everything about Aurelia's current situation. The club had been suffering silently. Membership fees had dropped. Several major sponsors had pulled out after a series of management scandals. Richard Whitmore had stepped back from daily operations, reportedly due to health issues, while Vanessa had taken a more visible role in club events, trying to maintain the image of power the family once held. The investment group needed someone to lead a buyout and restructuring plan, someone who understood the club's culture from the inside. I was, without them fully realizing it, the perfect person for the job. But I didn't rush in for revenge. I want to be honest about that. My first instinct wasn't to plot Vanessa's downfall. My first instinct was business. Could this club be saved? Could jobs be protected? Could this investment make sense? The numbers said yes. The club had strong assets, a loyal base of quieter, respectful members, and simply needed leadership that understood both operations and dignity, something it had clearly lost under Vanessa's growing influence. I remember calling Grace late one night, unsure of myself for the first time in years. What if I'm doing this for the wrong reasons? I asked her, what if this is just about proving something to Vanessa and not about actually helping this business? Grace was quiet for a moment before answering. Mia, wanting justice doesn't make your business judgment wrong. You've looked at the numbers. You know this deal makes sense on its own. The fact that it also happens to bring you back to a place that once hurt you doesn't taint the decision. It just makes it meaningful. Her words settled something in me that night, and I moved forward with a clear head instead of a heavy heart. I proposed a full buyout, positioning my company as the lead operator and part owner alongside the investment group. It took months of negotiation, careful financial structuring, and long nights reviewing contracts. But eventually, the deal was approved. I would become the majority stakeholder and operating owner of the Aurelia Club, the very place that fired me over a lie. The very place where a woman once told me people like me don't get second chances. I remember sitting alone in my office the night the papers were signed, staring at the agreement, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not anger, just quiet, steady peace. The kind that comes when years of pain finally start making sense. I wasn't walking back into Aurelia to destroy anyone. I was walking back in to reclaim what should have never been taken from me in the first place: my dignity, my name, and the truth. My first day back at Aurelia Club, I didn't announce anything publicly. I asked the board to keep the ownership change quiet until the official member meeting scheduled 2 weeks later. I wanted time to walk through the halls, meet the staff, and understand the club as it stood now, not as it once was in my memory. Many of the original staff members were gone, but a few remembered me. One older waiter, Thomas, who used to slip me leftover pastries at the end of long shifts, recognized me instantly in the hallway. His eyes went wide. Mia? Is that really you? When I told him I was the new owner, he had to sit down for a moment. He shook his head slowly and said, after everything that happened to you here, I always knew something wasn't right about that night. I just never had the courage to speak up. That single sentence confirmed what I had suspected for years. Somewhere, deep down, some people knew the truth. They were simply too afraid of losing their jobs to say it. During my walkthroughs, I discovered financial mismanagement tied to unnecessary personal expenses charged to the club's budget, several linked directly to events organized under Vanessa's direction. Not incredibly damaging on their own, but enough to show a clear pattern of entitlement and carelessness that had slowly eaten away at Aurelia's financial health. I also spent time quietly speaking with current staff members, not as their new owner giving orders, but simply as someone who wanted to understand daily life at the club from their point of view. Several employees, once they realized I genuinely wanted honest answers, began opening up about repeated complaints filed against certain members over the years, complaints that had been quietly buried by previous management to avoid conflict with powerful, high-paying families. One young front desk employee, clearly nervous, told me she had once been blamed for a lost item almost identical to my own experience years earlier, though thankfully she wasn't let go, only reprimanded unfairly. Hearing her story confirmed what I had long suspected. My experience wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, quietly repeated and quietly ignored, because no one in charge had ever been willing to challenge the people causing it. That realization strengthened my resolve. This wasn't only about correcting what happened to me. It was about finally breaking a cycle that had clearly hurt more people than anyone had ever acknowledged. The final member meeting was scheduled for a Friday evening, ironically the same day of the week as the gala years earlier that ended my first chapter at this club. I stood backstage before walking out to address the members, staff, and investors. My hands were steady, but my heart raced. Not from fear. From the weight of finally standing exactly where I had promised myself I would stand again. As I stepped onto that small stage, I saw her in the crowd. Vanessa Whitmore, sitting in the front row, completely unaware that the woman about to reintroduce herself as the new owner was the same young front desk employee she destroyed years ago. I stepped up to the small podium, looked out at the members, and introduced myself formally as the new majority owner and operator of the Aurelia Club. A polite applause followed, the kind reserved for formal business announcements. Vanessa clapped along, distracted, checking something on her phone, still not truly looking at me. Then I said something that made her lift her head. Before I talk about the future of this club, I want to talk about its past. Specifically, about a mistake this club made 3 years ago, when an honest young employee was wrongfully accused and let go, without proper investigation, based only on the word of a powerful member. The room went quiet. Vanessa's smile faded slightly, though she still didn't recognize me. That employee was me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face went pale as recognition finally hit her. I continued calmly, without anger in my voice, only clarity. I'm not here to publicly shame anyone, but I am here to correct a wrong that should have been corrected years ago. This club will operate under a new standard, one where staff are protected, where accusations are properly investigated, and where power does not decide truth. Then I turned toward Vanessa directly. The room's attention shifted with me. As part of restructuring member accounts under new ownership policies, several memberships are being reviewed for conduct violations documented over the past few years, including repeated harassment complaints filed quietly by staff who were too afraid to speak up before. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some members exchanged knowing glances, as if they too had witnessed moments they never spoke up about. Vanessa's husband, Richard, seated a few tables away, lowered his eyes to the table, saying nothing. Vanessa stood up abruptly. "This is outrageous. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," I said again calmly. "You're the woman who told a front desk employee that people like her don't get to make mistakes here. You were right about one thing, Vanessa. People don't get second chances in this club anymore, based on who their husband is. They get chances based on how they treat the people around them." Vanessa's face turned red, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. "You can't do this. I've been a member here for 15 years. And for at least 3 of those years," I replied. "Staff have quietly documented complaints about your conduct, complaints that were buried because no one wanted to challenge your husband's influence. Under new ownership, we don't bury those records anymore." I looked at her steadily and said the same words she once said to me, but with a very different meaning behind them now. "I know exactly who you are." I nodded to the club's new general manager, who approached Vanessa's table and calmly informed her that her membership was officially revoked, effective immediately, due to documented conduct violations under the new ownership standards. The golden card was placed on the table between us, the same kind of card she once waved arrogantly in front of underpaid staff, expecting endless obedience. For the first time, Vanessa Whitmore had absolutely nothing to say. Vanessa gathered her things quickly, her hands shaking as she reached for her coat. She didn't look at anyone as she walked toward the exit, her heels echoing against the marble floor in a silence so complete you could have heard a pin drop. No one stood up to stop her. No one offered comforting words. The same room that once stood straighter whenever she entered now simply watched her leave without a word. I didn't feel triumphant watching her go. I felt strangely calm, the kind of calm that comes after carrying something heavy for years and finally setting it down. After the meeting ended, several staff members approached me quietly, one by one. A woman named Elena, who had joined the club 2 years after I left, told me she had heard whispers about the girl who was wrongly accused, but never knew the full story until tonight. She thanked me, tears in her eyes, for finally giving the story its true ending. Thomas found me near the staff entrance, the same spot where he used to hand me leftover pastries during long shifts. He didn't say much. He simply placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Some things take a long time to make right. But tonight, this club finally did." Richard Whitmore approached me last, once most of the room had cleared. He looked tired, older than I remembered, the weight of years of quiet complicity visible in his eyes. "I should have said something back then," he said softly. "I let fear of losing my wife's approval outweigh doing what was right. I'm sorry, Mia. Truly." I nodded, accepting his apology without bitterness. "It took a long time to get here, Richard. But I'm glad the truth finally had its moment. There was nothing left to prove between us. The truth had already spoken for itself." Vanessa left the club that night without her membership, without her usual entourage of admiring members, and without the protection her husband's name once guaranteed her. I later learned that Richard Whitmore, weakened by health issues and troubled by years of quiet resentment from his wife's public behavior, did not fight to reverse the decision. Word spread that their marriage had already been strained behind closed doors, and this incident simply became the breaking point neither of them could ignore any longer. As for me, life at Aurelia changed completely under new leadership. We introduced clear complaint procedures for staff. We trained every employee not just in service, but in dignity, reminding them that respect must flow both ways, regardless of who holds the membership card. Thomas, the old waiter who once slipped me pastries during hard shifts, became part of our senior staff training team, helping mentor new employees with the same kindness he once showed me. Looking back now, I don't feel joy in Vanessa's downfall. I feel something calmer than that, closure. Because this was never really about revenge. It was about proving that truth eventually finds its way to the surface, no matter how long it takes to arrive. If there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's this. Never let someone's power convince you that your worth is smaller than theirs. Titles change. Money moves. Cards get canceled. But character, patience, and quiet persistence, those are the things that eventually decide who really wins in the end. To anyone out there who has ever been humiliated, wrongly blamed, or made to feel small by someone who thought their position made them untouchable, hold on. Keep building. Keep showing up for yourself, even when no one else will. Because somewhere down the road, life has a way of handing you the exact moment you need, at the exact time you're finally ready for it. And when that moment comes, you won't need to shout, or seek revenge, or prove anything through anger. You'll simply need to stand quietly, look someone in the eye, and say 4 simple words. "This card is canceled." A few months after that meeting, I sat with my mother on the small balcony of the apartment I had finally been able to renovate. She held a cup of tea in her hands, the same way she used to on the nights I came home defeated, and looked out over the city lights. "You remember what I told you," she said, "back when you cried on the kitchen floor after that night at the gala? That the world would show her who I am," I said, smiling. "I didn't know it would take this long," she admitted, laughing softly. "But I always knew it would happen. You were never someone who stayed down for long." I invited Grace to visit Aurelia Club a few weeks later, the woman who had given me a chance when no one else would. Walking her through the same halls I once cleaned coffee stains from, now as the person who owned them, felt like closing a circle I never thought I'd get to close. She squeezed my hand at the entrance and said quietly, "This is what happens when you refuse to let one bad chapter write your whole story." Today, Aurelia Club runs differently than it once did. We still serve the same elegant lunches, still host the same elegant galas, but underneath all of it, there's a new foundation, one built on respect, honesty, and the understanding that no title, no card, no amount of money gives anyone the right to make another person feel small. Sometimes, staff members ask me what advice I'd give someone going through what I went through. I always tell them the same thing my mother told me. Don't rush your revenge. Don't chase it. Build your life so completely, so honestly, that when justice does arrive, it arrives not because you forced it, but because you simply became someone it could no longer ignore. That, I believe, is the quietest, most powerful kind of victory there is.